I find myself calling the front desk. Can you bring me the real remote? I try to explain to them why I need the real remote. The maintenance guy comes. Other times no one's working, so I'm just going to play it on my computer or my phone.
Welcome to Story and Craft. Now, here's your host, Mark Preston.
All right, here we go. Another episode of Story and Craft. Welcome back. Good to have you. I'm Mark Preston. If this is your first episode, welcome. Glad to have you along. Today, sitting down with director Ash Avildsen. Now, he's not only a director, he has a record label. He's kind of a Renaissance guy, doing a lot of different things. But a new film out, his first big one. It is called Queen of the Ring. It is out today, Friday, March 7th. It's with Emily Bett Rickards, also Josh Lucas, Martin Kove, who is in Cobra Kai, as well as the original Karate Kid movies, which is kind of cool because Ash's father, John Avildsen, who was also a very well-known director, directed the Karate Kid movies as well as the Rocky movies, Lean on Me, and a whole lot more. Great conversation. Enjoyed sitting down with Ash. And don't forget, if you would, stop on by our website, small request, storyandcraftpod.com/rate. Head there, rate an episode, rate the show, leave some stars, leave a review. Make sure you, on your podcast app, whichever one you use, follow the show. That way you get notified every time we have a new episode. All right, so tell you what, let's jump right into it. Today, Ash Avildsen Day, right here on Story and Craft. So where are you joining me from today?
I am at the Santa Monica Proper Hotel.
How did you fare during the fires?
I was out of town. My home here is for sale, so I didn't really, very fortunate that it didn't really affect me at all. I wasn't here for any of it.
But yeah, it's good to hear you're okay though. So glad we had a chance to connect. I was checking out your stuff and kind of seeing you're sort of a, I don't want to say Renaissance guy, but you've done more than just dabble in a few things here. Is this the first big kind of release, Queen of the Ring? Is this the kind of the first big one? I know you've done some other projects, but is this kind of
this is the first big one for sure.
You got a great cast, and I've seen the previews. It all looks just fantastic. But I got to know how this even got to you, this project. Was this something that, you had kind of been tied in with, let's say, the writer? Or did they come to you? How did this come together for you?
I've always been a big fan of pro wrestling, and I wanted to make a fictional story that was kind of like a love letter to all my favorite stories from the 80s. And I felt that there wasn't really I felt like at the time there wasn't that movie that took place in the world of pro wrestling that had a great, inspirational ending. I loved The Wrestler by Aronofsky, but that's obviously about they have a wrestler. So I called Jim Ross, who is a legendary WWE executive and Hall of Famer and commentator, and asked if he'd work on developing it with me because he's lived it. I wanted it to be as authentic as possible. And he said, sure. By the way, have you ever heard of Mildred Burke? And I said, no, who's that? And he said, you should check out this book, Queen of the Ring. So that weekend I read the Queen of the Ring book. I found out all about Mildred Burke. I became completely enchanted with her story. And I called him back Monday morning and I said, forget about the 80s fictional thing. We have to tell this woman's story. This is incredible. And I was both upset and sad that I didn't know who Mildred Burke was, nor did any of my friends who were also big pro wrestling fans. We just had never heard her story or heard of her at all. So,
what era was she wrestling in, though? Because looking at the previews, this is going back 60s, 50s ish. Was that about right?
30s to 50s.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Mid 30s to mid 50s.
Yeah, because when I was growing up, I wasn't really big into wrestling, but wrestling was sort of kind of omnipresent growing up in Dallas and the Von Erich family. And that was, it was, because there was a time when they were doing like Pizza Hut commercials, they were like, it was mainstream enough. And so everybody knew who they were, just even if you weren't necessarily into it. But what kind of grabbed you about wrestling?
I was just so entertained by it, as a little kid, I got into it at a very young age. And I just found it wildly entertaining, the characters and the personas and all of the drama and theatrics. And I just fell in love with the world. I found it very, very entertaining.
Even watching the Was it Iron Claw? Was that the movie with about the Von Erichs? And you look at it, it was just, it felt like a little bit, it just kind of felt different. It felt kind of like a little bit of the Wild West a little bit, you know. Like I said, being in Dallas, it was kind of mainstream. We knew what it was all about. And then you kind of came into the WWE and there's just big spectacles and, it just seemed like it really grew and just kind of ballooned. Was wrestling a big thing back in the day, or was it, if you knew about it, you knew about it? Going back to when, the era that the movie takes place in.
It became a big deal for women, mainly because Mildred Burke broke through and became a superstar. The men's side didn't really explode into big pop culture until Gorgeous George and the age of television. Gorgeous George was actually credited with selling a massive amount of TVs. They were even calling them Georgie boxes because back in the 50s, people were just so entertained by him. And it does play a part in the film and in Mildred's story and was in the book, The Queen of the Ring. But the men were definitely drawing tickets, and they were drawing more tickets up until when Mildred broke. And once Mildred really broke through, she started headlining over men. She was, the first woman to do that in this world of sports and entertainment, to actually headline over men. But it was definitely bad. I mean, they were selling out arenas. We didn't go into so much of her international impact in the film, but yeah, she became an international superstar. And at the time, she was the highest paid female athlete in the world. And I believe the first ever female athlete to make $1 million. And it was really the first to do combat sports and become, a household name at the time. But because the peak of her career was prior to the television era of wrestling, she's been very forgotten about. I grew up knowing Mae Young and the Fabulous Moolah because they were still in WWE in their older years, but Mildred was never part of that. So she was really forgotten about by most.
The casting, like with Emily Beth Rickards and Josh Lucas, was casting, did you kind of know where you wanted to go with it? Or now you've got this story, you've got a screenplay, like, was it a challenge to find just the right folks, or did you kind of land on them pretty quick?
It was a challenge. I mean, first and foremost, it was a challenge just because it's an ambitious film for an independent production, and I'm not a name director. So, getting name actors in roles is very hard. But we were fortunate to get Emily and Josh, and they were terrific. We're really fortunate to get Walton Goggins as Jack.
Oh,
Pfeiffer.
yeah.
But it was definitely a challenge. I mean, it's just hard. Indie film, unless you have a really big studio or a big, name director on a project like this, getting very recognizable actors who are having good, runs in their career. It's tough. It's not easy.
Just kind of hit rewind a little bit of, you're a musician, you have the record label, which I'm kind of fascinated by, the whole record label thing, because I came up in radio for many years when I was in my 30s.
I can see that. You got the radio voice.
Yeah, I've been accused of that once or twice. It's been kind of a tectonic shift in the way things are done. Like I look at my kids, they're, 19, how old are my kids? 19, 20, 21. And how they discover music is different now. They got Spotify, primarily, but I guess like when we were coming up, you discovered music on the radio. Some people just hung out like what we have it like growing up in Sound Warehouse, and all the different music stores, just go hang out there and, see what's up. How do you define right now how the music industry is shifting? Because I wonder how record labels pull it together.
Yeah, it's never been easier to discover new music because there's no longer really like gatekeepers of distribution. Anyone can, record a song and get it on Spotify and Apple and all of those places. But there's also so much music that comes out every week that it's an incredible amount of new music weekly. So there's more competition and more, noise, if you will, to break through. So that's kind of like the double-edged sword of the digital era. But there's no magic formula. Everything plays a part. Whether you tour, music videos, social media, radio, word of mouth. if the internet just kind of embraces you, if you just kind of click into what's happening week to week with culture. But there's no magic wand. And most of the artists that end up having real careers that sustain, it's a combination of all of it. It's playing live, it's touring, it's press, it's music videos, it is playlisting, which is kind of a new form of radio. It's all of it. There's no.
Now, when you say playlisting, is that like notable folks put out, hey, this is my playlist of what I'm listening to? Is that kind of what you mean by playlisting?
There are like, human. There's like, I don't want to call them an influencer, but there are playlists that have like a face to them, like a human, like an ambassador. But a lot of the big playlists on Spotify, you don't really know who's running it. But
I see what you're saying. Yeah, if you're looking for like EDM, like a specific genre or something like that, somebody's curating that to some degree.
Yeah, and then they have like, music Fridays and things that are very like week to week. But yeah, there's a lot, depending on the genre or subgenre that you're listening to or looking for, the playlists help. But playlists don't break artists. The only thing that really breaks an artist is if people just falling in love with them.
That's what happened with my daughter, and I'm forgetting the country artist's name. But there's some folks who just like, especially during COVID, were just cranking out videos, YouTube or like Instagram. Next thing you know, they've got a bazillion downloads and a record deal. Coming up in radio, it was kind of, in a way, kind of fun. It was a little different because you always have the folks coming from a record label. Hey, let's take you out to a really expensive dinner. And let's, it was always them schmoozing the DJs, which the DJs rarely had any input on. It was really music director and program director, but there was always this kind of relationship and everybody knew who the record label folks were. And do you still have to work radio kind of the same way you did back in the day? Or is it just a small piece of what you're doing now?
I wasn't around. I started my label in 2006, and I was in a band that was signed to a label in 2004. So I was all on this side of the 2000s. Prior to that, there was a lot of like payola, which, they made illegal, which is basically, the labels were like buying their way onto the radio stations and bribing people and all of that.
Oh, yeah.
So that I've never experienced that or been a part of that. Thankfully, it's changed and it's more based on merit now. But there's still a lot of, a lot of it's relationships, and a lot of it's just how a song does once it comes out and how people are reacting to it. And
my kids don't buy albums. It's the whole, like, even how you make money in the music business seems to be a whole different dynamic because they'll just kick on Spotify. When you were coming up as a young guy, what were you listening to? What was your jam?
I always gravitated towards rock and alternative music at a young age. So it was, I loved a lot of the classic rock, even when I was a kid, Zeppelin and the Doors. I was born in 81. So really I was like, as a young kid, like even before puberty, it was Guns N' Roses and Metallica.
Yeah.
Skid Row, I loved their first.
But you're sandwiched right in there. You're right on the cusp. You're like right in between Gen X and kind of millennial. You're what they call you, an elder millennial. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I'm very grateful to have experienced the 80s and the 90s prior to everything becoming cell phones and like the early days of the internet with internet relay chat, IRC, and BBS and all that. And then even like growing up without a remote control for a television to now like, having an iPhone and a MacBook. And so I'm fortunate in the time that I've lived in the different decades. And then, as it went more into the 90s, I loved alternative rock. I loved grunge. I loved nu metal. Man, the 80s and 90s there was just so much great music. But I really just got into it going to like Tower Records and Sam Goody and reading the magazines, watching MTV.
Yeah. Did you grow up in the LA area?
No, I was born here. I lived here until I was about 4. But I grew up in D.C., Maryland, and Virginia.
Your dad, of course, director. But what did your mom? What was she up to?
My mom was a model. She was part of the Art Deco kind of this specific gypsy look. Her and her sister did. So she was quite a successful model. 1969 London, that whole scene.
So she was doing that, but how was that growing up with a mother who was a model?
It was like 35 when she had me. So she wasn't actively still modeling,
Oh, okay.
when she was already into her 40s, but she was like running modeling age, and she had like a modeling business, I vaguely remember. And she was still doing like some things that models at that age would do, like some wedding books and things, but it wasn't like when she was in her 20s, going around with her sister at all the big, events and all that. So
as far as, your dad directing, how aware of his work were you when you were younger?
It was, it was a challenging situation because I knew who he was and I had his last name. He was not in my life, but I did love his movies. And Karate Kid, when I was in elementary school, was like one of the biggest things in America.
Oh, yeah.
So it was constantly around, and I loved Lean on Me as well. So I loved his work, but I didn't know him, so it was a head fuck, Yeah, no easy way to describe.
So you kind of made a connection a little bit later on. About how old were you when you kind of dialed
30.
into in your 30s, which you've got a lot of miles into your wheels by the time you get into your 30s. What were you curious about? What were you, as you're developing? I don't mean necessarily the relationship as much, but maybe more, were you looking at things like professionally? Were you curious about what he had done? And you had that bug that maybe it was taking you in the direction that he had gone.
I always loved storytelling. I mean, I loved film and I loved music. I just decided to focus on music first because, I was growing up on the East Coast, so it's not like at the time, at least not in DC, Virginia, there was a movie business. But yeah. I just loved music, and I started playing in a band in high school with my best friends, and then I just really, fully committed to music in general. And I didn't focus on film until I was older, and I had established myself at a certain level in the music business and had a level of success and freedom that I could then diversify into film without kind of risking my whole everything to try, because it's obviously very, very difficult business. A lot of people in it and not a lot of seats at the table, so to speak.
Yeah.
So, and I also didn't want people to think that I was in any way trying to like cash in on my last name or emulate my father or misconstrue, my success because of some type of nepotism or something, because obviously that was not the case at all. I didn't even know him. But yeah, I just naturally gravitated towards music and then crossed over into the movie world. And there's definitely a lot of similarities between the two businesses, that's for sure.
Well, I think by the time you get into your 30s, you've kind of built a foundation for like who it is you are, more or less. And so that point, it's, whatever creatively, that's already flowing. So, were you big into picking your dad's brain on directing and style and technique and all that kind of stuff? Or were you just kind of osmotically just picking up on things?
Once we became, great friends, yeah, I loved learning from him and talking to him and hearing stories and getting his perspective and his, taste. And it was really beautiful the time we got to share together. And I definitely learned a lot from him. And I'm very grateful for that.
Have you had an opportunity to work with any of the, let's say, cinematographers, sound, any of the people that maybe had a chance to work with him on sets? Have you been able to kind of tap into that for this project or anything else you've worked on?
Just with an actor, Marty Cove, who's in Queen of the Ring, who was for his role in The Karate Kid and now in Cobra Kai. I believe he's the only actor, to my knowledge, that has worked with both me and my dad. But Marty's been fantastic. He's a really great guy. I puts me in the best mood when I'm hanging out with him. Just totally lovely. I can't say enough good things about Marty Cove.
Yeah, it's kind of cool to see him show back up in Cobra Kai. It's something I usually was watching with the kids, but now they're off at college. So I guess, whenever they get back into town, we kind of catch up on all of his shows. But just looking at the preview of the movie, did you come in with an idea of kind of how you wanted the tone, the feeling, the vibe of the movie? Did you already know where you wanted to go with it when you started off? Or was this more of a just kind of feel your way through it?
You should always have some type of idea of what you want to create before you start creating it. You'll obviously learn so much on the day and all that. But a big part of it also is like all my department heads that were brilliant in the worlds that they were in. The production designer, cinematographer, of course.
Yeah.
Very grateful to work with Andy Strahan. Hair and makeup, costume, and all. They all are just build the world together. I mean, it's one thing I just love so much about filmmaking is that it's such a collaborative team sport. That's just everyone is doing their part. Music, you have the producer and then you have the band members. It's a much smaller creative process, which is still a lot of fun as well. But the filmmaking, it's just so wonderful where there's so many different departments and so many moving pieces, and everyone is just collaborating, working towards this common goal to tell a story through pictures. And it's really just a very gratifying experience.
Hey, it's Mark Preston, and I would like to tell you a little bit about one of our sponsors, X-Chair. Whether you're working from home or in the office, if you have a job or a task that has you sitting for a long period of time, this is the chair for you. Very comfortable, very customizable. They'll make it pretty much any way you want it. The look, the feel, the fabrics, everything. Plus, this is the kind of chair you can adjust to make it fit you just right. No matter your body type, it's spot on. I love my X-Chair. It has the Elemax cooling, heating, and massage technology. It is going to make your lower back feel so very good. Got to throw a little bit of love to X-Chair. It's the chair I'm sitting in every time I talk to a guest. So I've had a lot of time to have my tush in this chair, and the tush, the back, everybody's happy. Just go to storyandcraftpod.com/chair. Once again, X-Chair, check it out, storyandcraftpod.com/chair. Love my X-Chair. Your back will thank you. Given that you had the music background, did you get involved at all in the scoring of the movie, or just kind of leave that up to your guy?
Very, very, very deeply. I mean, our composer, Aaron, who's brilliant, he's written the original score. I give, of course, feedback and notes and, direction on where we want it to go and how we want it to feel. And then for the original music, or for the songs in it, all the needle drops, that's all me. That's all my, just kind of taste and what I think is going to be best for each scene and each character. But the original score is Aaron Gilhouse, who's just, he's been so wonderful. He's really a gem. I think he's going to have a big career ahead of him.
Yeah, so given it takes place in the 30s, were you staying true to kind of the era of music, or did you kind of play with the music at all and maybe put some contemporary style tracks in there?
Yeah, to a degree. The nice thing about doing a story that not everyone knows so specifically, because most people don't know this story, is that you can take a lot more creative liberties with how you tell it, combining characters, creative license on certain moments. But on musically, I didn't want it to be like, okay, right now we're in 1952, so we have to play a song that's between 50 and 52. I stuck to the decade for a lot of it, not for all of it. There is some modern artists in it that still have a vintage feel to their sound, but it's modern production and modern recordings. But there's a lot of period music in it as well from the 40s and 50s. But I didn't do it very specific to the year. I just did it more for the feeling. There's just a lot of great music that came out slightly after 1954, which is when the movie ends. So I definitely played with the timeline a bit, but unless you're really a 40s and 50s music aficionado, I don't think most people will know. It's not like you're watching a 1960s period and all of a sudden Nirvana starts playing. Like, what is that? There's nothing like that that's that polarizing at all. At least in my opinion. In my opinion, all the music in it blends well with the scene that it plays in.
For your record label, what kind of music or genre do you have a specific focus, or do you kind of play with different genres in terms of who you like to have on the label?
I mean, the core of it is, I call it, all the different colors of the rock and roll rainbow, but it's rock music, it's alternative, it's metal, it's emo, hardcore, prog, But it's predominantly, all these different kind of flavors of rock and roll.
Yeah, one of the people that I kind of came up with in the 90s working in radio, a lot of them, for those who don't work in radio, even some who still are, they're like, oh yeah, rock and roll's dead. Oh man, it's dying. And I've been sounding that alarm, it seems like every few years, always has a way of coming back. Traditional like rock and roll, the way we perceive it. But as a music guy, what do you think is kind of emerging now? Is it like a genre or something that you think is going to be, as far as genre goes, or style, or whatever have you?
People really like hybrids and juxtapositions. So the combination of different genres being put together, I think, is still very popular, and that's always evolving.
I think that's happening in country music a bit, where it's
yeah.
There's
a lot of fusion and crossover happening in country. Modern country's really just popped into pop culture like it's never has before, in my opinion. I never found myself listening to much country, but nowadays it's become so much more just inventive and fresh that I actually do really enjoy a lot of it. And then it makes me go back and listen to some of the classic era stuff and like outlaw country and things I didn't really know much about. And I actually end up liking a lot of this classic, the classic rock of country. But the modern stuff is what kind of, was the gateway drug into it. But yeah, that's definitely a genre that's really reinvented itself.
Yeah, it's funny. I know a guy who runs a radio network out of Nashville, and he was telling me that what's popular right now with my kids' age, Gen Z kids, is a lot of the 90s country, the Brooks and Dunn and all that. And it's crazy because I remember my daughter, I think Neon Moon was on in the car. And so she just starts singing. I'm like, how the hell do you know this song? She's like, TikTok. So the discovery of music, we were talking about that before, the things you never would have thought, like, okay, there's this whole genre these kids are discovering through some random channel, Going back to the film and the filmmaking, as you're coming in, did you say, I want to do film, like theatrical release, or were you like, hey, TV's cool? Or do you have any preference on what you like to work on?
The one thing, the thing that's great about TV is that you get to keep expanding the story and the characters. And TV is you're essentially asking questions to create more and more episodes and seasons. And then with film, you're supposed to answer all the questions by the end. So it really, it's kind of two different directions of current flowing of storytelling, but they're both great, man. It's like apple pie, cherry pie or something. They're both great, but film obviously is exciting because it plays in movie theaters, and it you have to tell, for most movies anyway, like within 2 hours ish, give or take, you need to like have a beginning, middle, and end to the story. Television, you have the creative liberty to just keep going and going if people like it. So I love them both, but making an independent film is a bit more psychologically easier, because you're like, okay, it's done. Towards television, it's just a lot more. But at the same time, you can bring on different directors and writers, of course, and it becomes more of a writing team, showrunners, all that. But I love them both. But I think right now, and this is thanks to things like Letterboxd, there is, I think, like a resurgence happening with young people being excited about cinema and going to the movies and watching a lot of movies, writing reviews, critiquing, having a conversation with people online and offline, and just, going into a dark room for 2 hours and escaping, our daily lives, which was kind of lost for a while between the Netflix era and then COVID and everyone being on the couch. I think now there's this kind of renewed sense of excitement to go out to the movies.
But I think there is something kind of cool. Like, if you want to see the movie now, you got to get to the theater, you got to go see it. And I would imagine that this, especially the fight sequence or the wrestling sequences, those probably are just meant for a bigger screen. They
are. I mean, it's a much different experience. I don't, for most, I mean, for any film, I think it's a much different experience. And it really is for films that were specifically put together to be played in a theater, which this is. I mean, there's no comparison seeing it on a screen like that than, watching it on your laptop or, on a normal television. There's just, you can't really compare it. It's just not really comparable because, one's a movie theater, the other one's a living room.
Yeah, my kids' generation, some of them watch movies on their phone. I'm like, I can't do that. Some kids will sit there and just watch a whole movie on their phone. And I don't know, maybe I don't know if this is a sign of age or something. I don't know. I just can't do that.
There's certain movies that if I'm like, actually funny enough, I watch movies on my phone sometimes in hotels specifically because the hotel television, or I'll do it on my laptop. The hotel TV doesn't give you the real remote to it. So you can't turn off these settings. It's called the soap opera effect. It drives me insane. But most of these new TVs have a factory setting that's good for like reality TV or live sports or news, but it's terrible for scripted entertainment because of the interpolation. And so it essentially makes everything look like it's at a soap opera.
And
it destroys the look of a movie or a scripted.
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
And I find myself calling the front desk. Can you bring me the real remote? I try to explain to them why I need the real remote. The maintenance guy comes. Other times no one's working. So I'm just like, fuck it. I'm just going to play it on my computer or my phone for that reason. But I think a lot of young people, or just people in general that do watch movies on their phones, I think it's just out of convenience if they're laying in bed and, but with that said, and look, so I never really got into watching movies on the plane. I rather kind of work on my computer. But I get it because it helps pass the time. And sometimes you're like, I'm not going to be distracted. I'm just going to watch it on the plane. But, anytime you can go into a world and see a story, just do it. Phone, plane, it's better than not at all. Or just
that's true.
Seamlessly
through. Whenever I travel, I always we bring our Roku stick. And just plop that into the TV so we can watch whatever, without and pause it and whatever have you. Well, when you were coming up, what were you watching when you were a kid? Movie wise, TV, what was grabbing you?
When I was a kid, TV, TV prior to The Sopranos and HBO really kind of reinventing what television was. TV just was not nearly as compelling, in my opinion, like when I was a kid. There were still cool shows, but it wasn't like it is now. So, I watched, I always loved watching movies, all the stuff when Stand By Me, The Goonies, all the coming of age stuff when I was a kid, to as I got older, People vs. Larry Flint, A Time to Kill, Casino, I do love true stories. I've always been drawn to them, especially ones that aren't very well known. Because I feel like it's easier to watch it without being as critical or what you already have in your head of what it should or shouldn't be. So that's always nice when you know that it's true, but you're not that familiar with it.
Right.
It's easier to kind of just ride the wave of watching the movie.
Killers of Flower Moon. I was like, I didn't even know that story existed, but
that's a great example.
Were there directors that you were coming up whose style you dug?
I loved Oliver Stone, who actually I recently met, and he watched Queen of the Ring and wrote me a really wonderful email review of it, which was pretty awesome. That was a very full circle moment for me because he's been one of my biggest influences. But yeah, Oliver Stone's definitely a top 5 for me, top 3 even.
How would you define your directing style? Is it do you like to have a lot of intensity, or are you kind of laid back?
It depends what the scene is. I always think the energy on the set should be conducive to what the emotion is of the scene. So, if it's a very intimate, dramatic 2-person, just a one-on-one small room, soft-spoken, you want that energy around you to help the actors give that performance and go to the place that their characters are in. But, if you're when we shot the finale, which is 360 people everywhere in this auditorium, and they're doing moves and the actors are putting their bodies through, these stunts and this intensity, we want the crowd to go. So we want everyone kind of rallying them. So I always just try and take the approach of what are we trying to accomplish in the scene that we're shooting? What do we want the characters to be feeling? And what the emotions that we're expressing, and what do we want the audience that's watching to take from it. And so it's very specific to whatever is being shot, of like the style of, as far as like the energy on the set and how we're interacting with the actors.
I mean, this is a big one. I mean, looking at, all the wrestling and stuff, there's choreography involved. Did you get a case of, a case of nerves or like that it kind of bring you extra anxiety? Like, okay, it's not just actors acting. You've got choreography, you've got camera movements and all kinds of stuff happening. Was that intimidating at all? I mean, it was just kind of the first time you've encountered that kind of or approached this kind of a shoot?
It's definitely the most on like the stunt side. Yeah. And I've never done a wrestling, this was the first time I've done pro wrestling on camera. So it's one of the reasons we stunt casted 2 real wrestlers for the 2 roles that have the most in-ring action, because I just wanted actors to be able to do their own stunts repeatedly and get all the coverage we need. And that was going to be, on our timeline, much harder to do without people that do it professionally for a living. And so I'm very grateful that the 2 women we got were so great in the roles, both as pro wrestlers, but also as actors. I thought Kaylee Latimer and Tony Rizal, who both just knocked it out of the park.
Going back to your dad's work with Karate Kid, of course, I think my kids is trying to explain to them when they're watching Cobra Kai how big Karate Kid was, when it came out and the whole story. But that was a big film for your dad, and that had that same kind of, there was choreography that had to happen. Do you ever peek into your dad's films and just see how they inform you? Or do you ever go back and watch something and just try to deconstruct maybe what he was thinking about, or maybe what he was trying to accomplish, and maybe integrate that a little bit in what you do?
Yeah. I mean, from a visual, I mean, he was so great with montages and just getting the audience to feel part of the protagonist's underdog quest, if you will. But one thing that I think people will see in Queen of the Ring, that's something I, was kind of instilled with my father, is he was a big believer with like, okay, and what happens next? In the sense that, let's keep these people interested, especially now. He'd always joke, they got a million things going on. They have all these things they can do in their pocket, on their phone. Like, what happens next? Keep them in the story. Kind
of like a forward momentum kind of a thing.
Yeah. And so we have a lot of scenes in Queen of the Ring, and I don't think we move too fast, but I think we move at a pace, because you have to, we're going 20 plus years in 2 hours and change. Right. So we get to the main event before the 2 hour mark. There's a level of, having to cover as much ground as you can, but still have it flow and keep the audience engaged and on an emotional, ride with you. So he would always, talk about that, because, a lot of movies are out there that are purposely, by design, not to say that it's good or bad, it's all just your opinion and your taste, but like, they purposely go slow. Mm-hmm. And they're slow burn, and a lot of times the ones that are paced very slow can also be more kind of dark and depressing in the end, and that's not this.
Right.
It's not much. My dad did have some movies that leaned more on that, but he liked to keep it moving. He liked the momentum of scene to scene and just keeping the audience engaged in that regard. So I think that's definitely the style of Queen of the Ring, in the sense of how, each scene is hopefully making the audience feel like, oh, I can't go take a pee right now because I'm going to miss it. Other movies, sometimes you're just like, you know what, I'm good. I'm going to go to the restroom. I'll be back in a few minutes. Sure, I'll pick it right back up. But
it's moving slow enough. You can go knock that out, and whoever stayed, catch me up real quick. Yeah. Going forward, what do you have that you're working on now? Or do you have something in mind like, okay, this is where I want to get to next, be a TV film, even musically? What do you have going on?
I have a few different scripts I'm deciding between. Some are original. Some are also true stories that aren't very well known. I feel like it's opening up a it's going to open up a whole box for me to start going into them. But yeah, I definitely want to keep, the momentum as a filmmaker that hopefully Queen of the Ring brings me. And also I just want to get back on set. Post-production process, you spend, 4 or 5 weeks, 8 weeks prepping the movie, you shoot it for 4 or 5, 6 weeks, and then you work on it for a year plus.
Yeah.
And, the post-production process on most movies is so much longer than the actual production itself. So you really
it's the final telling of the story, how you cutting it together, where music, I mean, it's a whole, there's an a process which would drive me nuts, because I would be like, okay, am I done yet? Do you ever get to the point of going, okay, there's something else I can do, but I think we're good.
There's still, even right now, I'm still tweaking certain, musical moments, and I still watch it now. I'm like, you know what? I could tweak this scene. I could change this. My dad said something great. He was like, as far as the post-production process, he's like, just keep working on it until they take it away from you. And then eventually you have a date. And for us, we basically picked the date that we felt, okay, this gives the movie the best shot theatrically based upon the time of the year, what other movies are close to it. And then anything that helps people remember it. So we're in March, it's Women's History Month. And then March 8th, which is our opening Saturday, is International Women's Day. And there's not anything really else in the sports underdog, specifically female world of things around our date. So I think March 7th is hopefully one of the best dates we could have picked. So we basically had to set the deadline that, okay, we can't really make any more changes up till now. So tomorrow, we do the final mix, and then that's essentially it. But yeah, you can always continue to tweak and change, and also just try out other ideas, that's the nice thing. There's only so many hours in the day, but there's always a new idea to try. But eventually you just got to say it's enough. And also your desire to go tell a news story, because you've been working on one for so long.
Right. Well, that's the thing. I've mentioned it a number of times in the show that the times I've acted, nothing big at all. But it's like you show up, and it's its own work. Don't get me wrong, but you show up and you get to go home, and you've invested, however much time in it. But as a director, you're locking in well before in pre-production and doing the thing, and then the post-production. You got a year to 2 years of your life are dedicated to this one thing. So I guess that makes choosing that thing ultra important for you, because you're married to something for a while. Now, where did y'all shoot this film?
Shot in Louisville, Kentucky.
Is that a turn on for you? Okay, well, I get to go here to do this thing, or do you like going out traveling to get it?
I do love shooting outside of wherever I'm living, because it forces you to go live in a new city for enough time where you can actually really get a feel for the city. It's one thing to go to a city for 3-5 days, a week vacation, or if you're on tour, we'd only be in a city for a day or two. So it's hard to really experience it. But when you're living in a city for months, you actually at least can really get a much more real experience of what that city is and how it is. So I can proudly say I lived in Louisville, Kentucky, because I was there for several months between scouting and then prep and then shooting. But yeah, that's part of the magic of the adventure of making films, is just going to a place that you've never been and just putting the flag in the ground and getting to work.
When you're just kind of having your own time, how you I'd say hobby, but what is it that you're enjoying doing that kind of lets you clear your head and just kind of decompress?
On a physical side, I do, hot sauna, cold plunge. I try and exercise and walk a lot. But on a personal level, I'm a father for the first time. So spending as much time as I can with my little 2.5-year-old boy. I didn't have this growing up, so it's been a very cathartic, incredible experience.
Yeah,
being a father and seeing having all these moments that I never experienced with my dad. So I'm hypersensitive to just the magic of parenthood, and specifically a father to a son. And I hopefully we have another one. I'd love to have a little girl. But that's really been just a huge part ever since he was born. It's just, I'm so grateful that I have him and that I get to be in his life. And He's in my life. He's actually in the movie. He plays the little baby.
Really?
Yeah.
Did you grow up as an only kid, or did you have siblings around?
I had an older brother, different father, older brother. I mean, we're technically half brothers, but he's my brother. I mean, we never thought of it like that. And then I have 2 half brothers on my dad's side that I didn't know at all, that I still today barely know. Then I have a half sister on my dad's side who actually I've become pretty close with, and I love her to death. But yeah, growing up, I had one older brother that would always beat my ass and really piss me off. But now it's grown up.
Yeah, I grew up as an only child. I'm living vicariously through my kids. You know, it's like to have siblings, and I'm kind of just observing.
They're out of college now?
Yeah, no, my daughter Lily just graduated. She's 21. She's graduated from Loyola. And then my son is still there. He's 20. And my youngest is down at Boca Raton at school. She's 19.
You were a young dad.
Yeah. No, I was 30 when I had my first, which was, a little later than some, but earlier than others. That was a pretty good age to have.
30's good, and gosh, I had mine when I was 40. So.
Before we get going here, I always have my 7 questions I like to throw in on the back end. A little extra fun, just extra get to know you. The first one I always ask is, what is your favorite comfort food? Something you just love, best day, worst day, just love to, grab a hold of it.
I mean, my guilty pleasure, although I found I had high cholesterol, so I'm not eating these anytime soon. I love a real Philly cheesesteak, although with like provolone, I don't do the cheese whiz. So that's like my guilty pleasure. And then other than that, I mean, pizza, Popeye's fried chicken. But again, this is stuff I'm really not eating.
I feel like I have liberty. I'm taking a statin now, and I think it's more genetic. I have a little bit of a cholesterol thing. Not bad, but, now I'm going, can I have that? I'm down in Texas, so I'm like, can I have that chicken fried steak? Yeah, I'll do that. I'm like, I like
and
real
then on
cholesterol.
the dessert side, I'm a big, I love frozen yogurt. That's my guilty pleasure for dessert.
Now, the next question I got for you is, if you were to sit down with 3 people, living or not, you're going to have a cup of coffee, sit down for a few hours and talk story. Who would those 3 people be that you would like to sit down with?
Well, just because she's so fresh on my mind, I'd love to sit with Mildred Burke. I've always, it'd probably be Mildred Burke, John F. Kennedy, and Bob Marley. I think that would be a great hang.
Very cool. Yeah, I was just Bob Marley just came up. I was speaking with Jimmy Buffett's daughter Delaney and Katie Corwin. They have a film coming out, and Bob Marley came up, and I was like, it's funny because I always listen to your dad's music. There's a through line. I heard Bob Marley. I said, was your dad really, really into Bob Marley? She's like, yeah, my brother's middle name is Marley. I was like, apparently so. So I think he's only come up once before, and that was last week. So very good. Now, going back when you were young, who was your first celebrity crush when you were a young guy?
Well, the first, I mean, she wasn't, I don't know if she's a celebrity, but the first time I got like aroused was a girl in the Rock the Cradle of Love, Billy Idol music video.
Oh, well, we're old enough to remember the videos, like Tony Katane, and
but as far as like, I mean, the first time I remember like putting like a girl as like the wallpaper on my computer and stuff, that probably was when Sandra Bullock first came out. Mm-hmm. I was like a teen. That was the first one I remember really just, like the wallpaper, that whole thing.
Yeah. It's the first time anybody's mentioned that. I forgot that people used to put wallpaper of like a model or something. I think, but when I was a kid, it was posters, and I think like Kathy Ireland was a big one, and Cindy Crawford, I think.
Cindy was up there. That's a big one. Definitely. Yeah, Cindy Crawford had some wallpapers.
You're the first person to mention that, and I'd literally forgotten about wallpapers and downloading and trying to you got your dial-up modem trying to get that stuff downloaded took forever, and you always got yourself a nice healthy virus out of the deal. Now, next question, if you're going to be living on an exotic island somewhere for a whole year, now somewhere you want to be, it's a resort, it's nice, it's not like you're castaway, but you don't have streaming, so you have to bring a movie you can watch over and over again, a DVD and an album, or it could even be a box set if you want, but something you could listen to all year long, what would that DVD and the music, what would the CD be?
The album would be Florence and the Machine Ceremonials. Got stranded on an island, so I have to think. I'm gonna want the right ending to lift me up. Thinking if I'm on an island and am I celebrating? Is this like a castaway scenario where I'm stranded and I hope someone finds me?
It's a year of chill.
Yeah, a year of chill. Okay. What would it be? That's a great question. Gosh, I don't know. I will say, I always find myself going back to The People vs. Larry Flint. I really, really love that movie. It's just a really fun ride.
And Woody Harrelson is just so underrated. I think he's just such a great.
Oh yeah,
the way he gets into stuff.
Yeah. Fuck it. The People vs. Larry Flint. There you go.
Now, if you were to go stem to stern, beginning to the end of a day, from time you wake up, time you go to sleep, if you were to define a perfect day, what would the component parts be of a perfect day, beginning to end, for you? So the key parts.
The key parts. Well, it would be, waking up and going to sleep with my family, having a good moment of exercise, ideally outside in good weather, getting a great sweat, a great sauna, some time to write, some time to eat some clean organic food, time to catch up with a friend, listen to some music, watch a great movie. Yeah, a massage. I'm a big fan of massages. And I need to get back into yoga. But, self-care, it's easy. It's easy to put ourselves last, especially when you're trying to accomplish all these things. You have all this kind of self-induced pressure. So I try and remember to unplug as much as I can, but it's very hard. You really have to practice it. It has to become a practice of self-care and not,
because it's too easy for the back of your brain to be processing, going, you could be getting this done now, and you could be getting that done now, and you forget, okay, I need to take care of just doing nothing.
Yeah.
That's something I'm trying to work on as well. Yeah,
it's really hard, especially if you're running your own company or working on your own project. There's never an end until you just say, okay, I'm done for now. It's not like you're, I used to wait tables and deliver pizzas and all these, just normal hourly jobs when I was growing up. And you deliver the pizzas for 8 hours, you go home, you're done. You're not thinking about, I wonder what my first address is going to be or what the order is going to. You're just out of sight, out of mind. But with, a lot of the things in other worlds, it's never ending. It's there's a million things right now I need to be doing to make sure the film is getting marketed right, and coordinating everything with the cast and the press and the theater. It's just never ending, and it's
it's a matter of delegation. That's my biggest problem. Is I'm not that I don't trust somebody can do a good job. It's sometimes I got to get this. There's a certain thing I'm looking for, and the time it takes me to explain it, maybe go through a first. I'll just get it done and do it myself, and I know that's probably not optimal, but delegation is something I'm working on.
It's hard. Yeah. Letting go and letting, just kind of trusting someone else to handle it. It's tough.
Now, the next question I got for you is, if you weren't doing this, if this was not an option for you as a vocation, what would be the next thing that you would do that you feel like you would find joy doing?
I always either wanted to be I was really I grew up in DC, so I loved history. I always, as I mentioned, meeting JFK and Bob Marley, these were people that really helped fight for truth and honor and for world peace. And so I did have a passion for trying to make the world better. And a lot of times it has to come through politics and leaders. I also was, considered being an attorney, specifically for either criminal defense to try and, find people that I believe was innocent and get them acquitted, or, an attorney to help, pass better laws. Professor, attorney, politician, probably something like that if I wasn't into music and film.
Now, the last question I got for you, if you could jump into that DeLorean, travel back to when you're 16 years old, and you have a piece of advice to offer yourself, either to make that moment a little bit better or to put yourself on a little bit different trajectory, what would that piece of advice be that you would offer to yourself?
Probably to exercise more patience and gratitude for just the gift of life, and not letting myself get worked up because of how other people are treating me, how my luck of the draw is with the world, all those things. I think I really just try and instill gratitude for, being able to even have the gift of life. I mean, life is so fragile every day now. I'm at that age where there's constantly people dying that I've known or falling ill. And that would probably be it, to just really enjoy. And also, I know, it's a cliche, but to really enjoy the moment. The present is just that. It's a present. It's a gift that you're alive. And it's very easy to focus, fixate on the future or focus on the future, fixate on the past versus still really enjoying.
Live in the moment. Yeah.
That's it,
Yeah, I think it's one of the things as you get older, you start appreciating your time a little bit more and how you're investing it and trying to live in the moment. It'd be so wonderful if I had that, if you had that as a kid when you were young, But man, I so appreciate you spending some time with me. I'm so jazzed to see the film.
We were just talking about you, Izzy. Oh, there's my son.
There he He's like, who is this guy?
You're going to see this one day when you're all grown up researching your dad. And this is going to be you seeing yourself on the FaceTime.
Well, my friend, you take care. Go talk to your little one. Enjoy that time. But hopefully down the line, we'll have a chance to connect.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mark. Great to meet you.
All right, there you go. Ash Avildsen. The new film is called Queen of the Ring. It is out today, Friday, March 7th, in theaters. Check it out. Emily Bett Rickards is in it. Josh Lucas, Martin Kove, who was in the Karate Kid movies. So it's kind of a cool connection, as we discussed, that he's directing Martin Kove, just like his father did, John Avildsen, in the Karate Kid movies. Okay, so do me a favor if you would. I ask every week, small request. Pop over to storyandcraftpod.com/rate. Or, of course, just open up your podcast app, whichever one you use. Make sure to follow the show. You get notified every time there's a new episode. Also, leave a review if you would. Drop some stars, rate an episode or the show, or whatever you would like to do. It's always appreciated because it helps people to find the show. I'm going to get on out of here. Do me a favor, have a wonderful weekend. Or let's say you're listening to this during the week. Have a great week. We'll be back in a few days. Another fun conversation for you. And of course, as always, I want to thank you again for making what I got going on here part of whatever you've got going on. I will chat with you in a few days. Another great conversation coming up right here on Story and Craft.
That's it for this episode of Story and Craft. Join Mark next week for more conversation right here on Story and Craft. Story and Craft is a presentation of Mark Preston Productions, LLC. Executive producer is Mark Preston. Associate producer is Zachary Holden. Please rate and review Story and Craft on Apple Podcasts. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. You can subscribe to show updates and stay in the know. Just head to storyandcraftpod.com and sign up for the newsletter. I'm Emma Dillon. See you next time, and remember, keep telling your story. Come on.